Hey, how's it going, everyone? Everyone, man, this is my first video. Um, I got a question, and I want to see if anyone else has had a similar experience. Um, Little background: I'm 39 years old, and I'm retired. Um, I've had a pretty decent life, but something has got me curious. My parents did est back before I was born. I think it was shortly before I was born, within a year or two. You can do the math on that, figure out when that would be. But it was back when it was est. This touch and feel landmark stuff. And I think it worked for one of them, and one of them, I don't think it worked for. But it definitely worked for me. So what I'm thinking is like secondhand brainwashing. And I'm using that in the best possible sense. I've met a lot of people that can really have their brains washed. Maybe they just didn't scrub hard enough. But because I've noticed that it doesn't necessarily work for the people in it. But I'm curious about the next generation. Uh, there are certain things, certain thoughts, certain concepts that were just passed on to me as obvious. I mean, the idea that you're responsible for everything was that was just a given, obviously. If something bad happened, you played some part in that. You are there, man. And if you're experiencing it as bad, that's you too. I mean, all of it was just obvious as I was growing up. And I got thinking while I was sitting around, because I don't have much to do. I mean, tend my fruit trees and stuff and sit around thinking while retired. And I was watching some videos, watched a interview with Werner Erhard, and I get it, man. No, but I mean, it's obvious. Everything he says is completely obvious. And there's experiments in some of his talks, and people take them as they just don't get it. I don't know. And I never went to Est. I never went to Landmark. I did consider sending my daughter at one point, but I think it's too late. I don't know. She was raised by her mother most of her young life, until teens, and then since then I've raised her. And I think at this point they need a bigger scrub brush, and Landmark just doesn't use the big scrub brushes or scouring pads to scrub away to brainwash people anymore. So I don't think they can. But I got to thinking that probably that's why I was able to retire before I was 40 years old, was in part due to est. I'm curious about the experience of other children whose parents did est. And back when it was est, back when it wasn't something where it was just this thing to like throw your money into. It's a great scam. It's a brilliant idea. I mean, they really took the ideas and capitalized on. But and I suppose if you're smart enough to realize the scam, then you get out and you've got it already. You don't need to stick around. I think the people that are getting scammed are the ones who don't get it, obviously. So I suppose that works. Is if they don't get it, they're still fucking there till they get it. Makes sense to me. Idiots, man. But anyway, but I can understand. I mean, I've heard that the modern Landmark is bullshit compared to the way it used to be. It seems that way in my experience. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just curious what your thoughts are. If you're a child of S, uh, and part of it's probably my age. Um, I think I'm one of the last years. I was born in 1978. I think I'm one of the last kids of the generation where, man, I started working when I was in middle school. And of course, because if I wanted to improve my life, if I wanted to be a better person, I was in charge of it all. If stuff wasn't going right, that was my fault. Um, and I think it's funny. S is often described as subjective. That there isn't a strong. Um, that it is all what you make it. Life is what you make it. Sort of, you know, new agey. And I mean that in the philosophical sense, not the new agey, touchy-feely bullshit sense. Uh, but that dovetailed. I mean, I was a libertarian before I could vote. Um, Harry Brown and what's it? I can't remember which year he ran. Uh, that I was paying attention. Same year Ross Perot ran. Could have been '96, but I, as soon as I saw his ads on TV, and I was that was it. I was a libertarian, um, obviously. Uh, Graduated from law school in 2010. Shortly afterward, I went on a cruise and read Ayn Rand. Uh, Most of what she said was obvious. It flowed naturally from just obvious. Uh, yeah. Um, I'd started my own business before then. One of the reasons I was able to retire, but not the main reason, because while I ran my business, I gave myself a salary that was less than the minimum wage. I earned uh, take home was $1,250 a month, uh, and I was able to save enough to retire in how long did the business last? About 8 years. So, um, so I'm tired of hearing people bitch about the minimum wage and how they're poor because they can't afford to. No, you're poor because you make choices that are bad choices. You did it, and you're experiencing it that way because that's your choice, man. That's your story. You want to be poor. It's obvious, and so yeah, I'm really curious if there's other like children of whose parents did ask them who have had a similar or much different experience, who it's fucked up their lives completely and they can't get out of their own way or whatever. I don't know, um, but I'm really interested in this. I have nothing. I have nothing better to do than think, and I'd like to hear from other people. Um, Yeah, I don't know if my experience is unique. Um, I mean, certainly everybody's life is unique. Uh, I can go a little into the background of that. I was born while my parents, in an effort to save their marriage, were traveling cross country on horseback. Um, so that's different. My parents were both hippie-ish, but they were New England hippies. They weren't the West Coast college know-it-all hippies, as South Park might describe them. They weren't the draft dodging, parents of rich kids going to college. Um, they were. They believed the war was wrong. They believed the country was headed in the wrong direction. They were hippies for a reason, I guess. I don't know. Um, yeah. So, so I don't know. Maybe that's different. Maybe a lot of the children of Est are on the West Coast, and they had the college know-it-all hippie parents who haven't, and they've never been poor. They've never thought about it. But you know, I went from being homeless to retiring before age 40. Um, and I never became rich, but I became comfortable. And that's, when I was a kid, that was what I considered rich. If you were not worrying about where your food was coming from, not worrying about whether you were going to be evicted from your apartment, kicked out of your apartment. If you had enough money to survive and just live your life, then you were rich. So I guess by that standard, by my own standard when I was young, I am now rich, but not by anybody else's standard. So I don't know where this video is going. I feel like I've lost my track. I don't know, but I think brainwashing can be a good thing. I wish more people could get their brains washed thoroughly, in the good way. It's a strange turn of phrase, brainwashing, because brainwashing is great. I mean, washing anything is usually good. I mean, unless it's, delicate, do not, wash. So dry clean only. But brains aren't like that. Brains are malleable. They're very resilient. Phineas Gage and all that. I believe he was from Vermont, or certainly from the area where I grew up. So brains are malleable anyway, and very plastic. That's the word I was looking for. And so they can do a lot, but the problem is they get like a computer programmed, and I think the problem is people think of brainwashing as creating, you take away the old worldview, for lack of a better term, like underlying philosophical grounding, like the for lack of a better term, I'm going to use a computer one. Like, you take away the operating system and you reinstall a new one. And that's not what I'd call brainwashing. The best brainwashing would be to wipe out the operating system and let you build a new one. Or, one that works. And you don't need to be given that. Nobody needs to give you an operating. That's what brains are for. You come up with your own. And that's what I liked about Best and Werner Erhard is they didn't give you a new truth to replace your story. They gave you possibilities. Just think about it. Just, be there. Be in that pod. Don't take it as a new truth that now you must live your life according to that truth. That's absurd, man. That's just fucking absurd. So I don't know.